never thought the man I loved for 12 years would be the one to break me. But the night I found his messages meant for someone else, my entire world shattered. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing the life I thought we had, the love I thought was real. And that night, that was just the beginning. Shattered by deception. The world around me felt suddenly unfamiliar. The walls of my home, the furniture, even the soft bed I had shared with him for years. Everything felt foreign. It was as if the life I had built had crumbled in an instant, leaving behind nothing but debris and silence. I never imagined my love story would end like this. I had always believed that trust was the foundation of a marriage, that no matter how difficult things got, as long as two people held on to each other, they could weather any storm. But what happens when the very person you trusted with your soul is the one who betrays you the most? That was the question I found myself asking as I sat on the cold kitchen floor, staring at the glowing screen of my husband's phone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, the undeniable proof of his betrayal flashing before my eyes. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible. She has no idea. She trusts me too much. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. I wanted to scream, to cry, to smash the phone against the wall, but I couldn't move. My entire body was paralyzed, trapped between disbelief and devastation. This couldn't be happening. Not to me, not to us. For 12 years, I had loved him. Through every hardship, every joy, every mundane moment in between, I had given him everything. My loyalty, my dreams, my heart. And now I was nothing more than a fool. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, though it tasted like sorrow. How many nights had I laid beside him, completely unaware that he was texting her? How many mornings had he kissed me goodbye, only to run straight into her arms? A rush of memories flooded my mind. Our wedding day, the birth of our daughter, the quiet moments we had shared over cups of coffee in the early morning light. Had it all been a lie? The weight of betrayal was suffocating, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. I clutched the phone tighter. My vision blurred with tears, but I kept scrolling, reading every painful word, every hidden promise he had made to someone else. I should have seen the signs, the late nights, the sudden distance, the way he had stopped looking at me the way he used to. But love makes you blind, and I had been blind for far too long. I heard the front door open, the sound of his keys jingling as he stepped inside. My pulse quickened, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand answers. But when I turned my head and saw him standing there looking at me with that familiar, easy smile, I couldn't. Not yet, because I wasn't ready to hear the lies he would tell, because I wasn't sure I could survive hearing the truth. His smile was the same, that familiar, effortless grin, the one that used to make my heart flutter, the one I had fallen in love with so many years ago. But tonight, it felt different. Fake, like a mask he had perfected over time. "Hey, babe." His voice was casual, as if he hadn't just walked into a home where his entire world was about to collapse. "You're still up?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw his phone at his face and watch his expression change as he realized the lies he had built were crumbling before him. But I didn't. Instead, I forced my voice to stay steady, swallowing down the storm raging inside me. Yeah, couldn't sleep. He walked toward me, setting his keys down on the counter. His eyes scanned my face, and for a brief second, I wondered if he could sense it. The shift. The fact that I was no longer the oblivious wife who believed in his every word. "You okay?" he asked, tilting his head. Liar. I almost laughed at the irony of it all. Was I okay? Number, I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, struggling to keep myself afloat. "I'm fine," I lied, mirroring his deception. Because that's what we were now, a house filled with lies. I watched as he moved past me, heading to the fridge to grab a beer. My fingers clenched around his phone, my nails digging into my palm. Every second that passed felt unbearable. The weight of what I had discovered pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Should I confront him now? Should I throw the evidence in his face and watch him try to explain it away? Or should I wait? Wait until I could look him in the eyes and no longer feel the love that had kept me shackled to him for so long. He leaned against the counter, sipping his drink. You sure you're okay? You seem off. I looked at him then, really looked at him, at the man I had loved, the man I had trusted with every piece of me. And for the first time in 12 years, I saw him clearly. I saw the distance in his eyes, the way his fingers tapped anxiously against the bottle. I saw the way he avoided my gaze for too long, as if he was afraid of what he might find there. And suddenly, I didn't want to be in the same room with him anymore. I'm just tired, I muttered, pushing myself up from the chair. I'm going to bed. He nodded, taking another sip of his beer. All right, I'll be up in a bit. Lies. He wasn't coming to bed. Not yet. He'd stay up, scrolling through his phone, waiting for her reply. And I was going to lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I had been sleeping beside a stranger. The breaking point. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the words from his messages replayed in my mind, over and over. She has no idea. She trusts me too much. How foolish I had been. By the time the sun rose, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was angry. And I knew, without a doubt, that I couldn't pretend any longer. As he stood in front of the bathroom mirror, shaving like it was just another normal morning, I walked up behind him and held out his phone. You left this downstairs, I said, my voice calm. He met my gaze in the mirror, his expression unreadable. Oh, thanks, babe. He reached for it, but I didn't let go. Unlock it, I said. His hand froze. A flicker of panic flashed in his eyes, so quick that most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. And in that moment, I knew, even before he spoke, even before the excuses began, I knew. My husband, the man I had given my entire life to, was about to look me in the eyes and lie. Why? What's wrong? He asked, his voice forced, casual. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Just unlock it. He hesitated, just for a second. But that second told me everything I needed to know. He was guilty, and he knew I had found out. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited, as I gave him one final chance to tell me the truth. But instead of admitting what he had done, he sighed, rolled his eyes. God, are we really doing this? He muttered. I felt something inside me snap. Yes, I said, my voice shaking but firm. We are. For 12 years I had chosen to believe in him, to fight for us, to trust him even when things felt distant and uncertain. But that was over now. Because I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was a woman who had just realized that the person she loved most was the one who had been breaking her heart all along. And I wasn't going to let him break me any longer. The moment stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My fingers tightened around his phone. He still hadn't unlocked it. He still hadn't said a word. But his silence screamed louder than any confession ever could. I don't have time for this, he muttered, turning back to the mirror, as if the conversation didn't matter, as if I didn't matter. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. You don't have time? My voice was quieter than I expected, but it was laced with something new, something dangerous. For what? For me? For this marriage? Or just for the truth? His jaw tensed. I don't know what you're talking about. Liar. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter, my nails pressing into my palm. Unlock it! Jesus, why are you acting crazy? He let out a forced chuckle, shaking his head like I was being irrational, like I was just another overly emotional wife, making a big deal out of nothing. That word, crazy. I had spent years bending over backward to keep this marriage together. I had stayed up late waiting for him, convinced myself he was just tired, just stressed, just not in the mood. I had swallowed my doubts, ignored my instincts, and let love blind me to the obvious. And now, even when faced with the truth, he still thought he could make me doubt myself. Not this time. I saw the messages. My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking. I read every single one. For the first time, his entire body went still. He turned to look at me, and for a split second I saw it. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of being caught. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mind was racing, trying to calculate his next move, trying to figure out if he could still lie his way out of this. I didn't give him the chance. How long? I asked. It's not what you think? A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. Not what I think? I shook my head. I think my husband has been sleeping with someone else. I think he's been lying to me for months, maybe years. I think I just wasted 12 years of my life on a man who never really loved me. I took a step closer, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. So tell me, what exactly am I getting wrong? His eyes darted away. That was all the confirmation I needed. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The walls of our home, the place where we had built a life, raised our daughter, shared whispered secrets in the dark, felt like they were caving in. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was the death of everything I had believed in, the last lie. It didn't mean anything, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stared at him, stunned. That was his excuse? That was what he thought would make this better? It didn't mean anything, I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. You destroyed our marriage, you shattered my heart, and you're standing here telling me it didn't mean anything? He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration building. I messed up, okay? But I didn't plan for this to happen. You didn't plan? My chest burned with fury. You texted her every night. You snuck around. You lied to my face. Don't stand there and act like this was some accident. His expression darkened. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this. I inhaled sharply. Like this. Like a woman whose entire life had just crumbled in front of her. Like a wife who had just discovered that the man she loved had been lying to her for God knows how long. You knew I'd react like this? I repeated, my voice eerily calm. So instead of being honest, you let me go on believing we were okay? You let me love you while you were loving someone else? He exhaled sharply. It wasn't love. And somehow that made it worse. Because if it had been love, if he had found something in her that he had lost in me, maybe I could understand. Maybe I could at least find a reason in all of this pain. But to throw away everything? Just for nothing? It made me feel even more disposable. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I want you out. He blinked. Wait. I want you out of this house. Today. Panic flashed in his eyes. We can fix this. A sharp pain twisted in my chest, but I ignored it. But I had spent years fixing things, holding us together while he slowly pulled us apart. Not anymore. I don't want to fix this, I whispered. I watched the realization sink in. The truth that he had finally lost me. He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned away before he could. I walked out of that room, out of his reach, out of the prison I had unknowingly built for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I had always thought silence was peaceful, but now it felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in, trapping me in the wreckage of a life I no longer recognized. He was gone. I had stood by the front door, watching as he packed a small bag, fumbling with his clothes, avoiding my gaze. He had tried to speak, tried to explain, to beg, to say something that would make this easier. But I didn't let him. Because nothing could. The moment the door shut behind him, I expected to feel relief, to finally breathe. But all I felt was emptiness. I sank onto the couch, my body heavy with exhaustion. My mind replayed everything, the words, the lies, the moment I realized the man I loved wasn't the man I thought he was. For 12 years, I had been his wife. I had built my life around him, shaped my dreams to fit ours, sacrificed parts of myself to make this marriage work. And now, I didn't know who I was anymore. The ghost of us. I reached for my phone, scrolling mindlessly through old photos. There we were, smiling on our wedding day, our hands intertwined, eyes filled with promises we thought we'd keep. There we were, holding our daughter for the first time, exhausted but beaming, believing we had everything we'd ever need. There we were, on vacations, at dinner dates, dancing in the kitchen late at night when no one was watching. Had any of it been real? Or had I been living in a dream while he had already woken up? I felt the tears coming, hot and uncontrollable. I buried my face in my hands, my body shaking as sobs ripped through me. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be angry. But at that moment, all I could be was broken. I cried for the woman I used to be, the one who had believed in love, in loyalty, in forever. I cried for the years I had wasted, for the signs I had ignored, for the pain I had convinced myself wasn't real. I cried for my daughter, who would grow up in a house without both of her parents under the same roof. But most of all, I cried because I still loved him. And I hated myself for it. The first night alone, the bed felt too big, too cold. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fan, feeling the absence of the man who had once been my entire world. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. I heard his voice. I felt his touch. I wanted to erase him, to scrub every memory from my skin, to forget the way he had made me laugh, the way he had made me feel safe, before I knew it was all a lie. But the memories clung to me like ghosts, whispering in the dark, refusing to let go. I turned onto my side, pressing my face into the pillow, inhaling deeply. It still smelled like him. A sharp pain stabbed through my chest, and I clenched my fists, hating that even now, even after everything, a part of me still craved his presence. Would it always be like this? Would I always love someone who had never truly loved me? The morning after, I woke up to the sound of my daughter's voice. "Mommy?" I blinked, my eyes swollen from crying, my body aching from the weight of everything I had lost. She stood by the bed, her small face filled with concern. "Where's Daddy?" My heart clenched. I sat up slowly, reaching for her hand, pulling her close. "Daddy's not here right now, baby." Her brows furrowed. "Is he coming back?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. I could lie. I could tell her something comforting, something that would shield her from the truth. But I was done with lies. Not for a while, sweetheart. She studied me for a moment, her young mind trying to piece together what that meant. Then, to my surprise, she climbed onto the bed and curled up beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. "It's okay, Mommy." Her voice was small, but certain. "I'll stay with you." And just like that, the tightness in my chest loosened. Just a little. Because even in the middle of all this pain, I still had her. I still had love. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to start again. The days blurred together. Morning turned into night, and yet somehow time felt frozen. The weight of his absence still lingered in the air, clinging to every empty space he once occupied. But I didn't break. Not completely. I still woke up every morning, still made breakfast for my daughter, still went to work, still answered texts from friends who were too afraid to ask what had really happened. On the outside, I was fine. But inside, I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown, wondering if I had the strength to take the next step. The first steps toward freedom, the first time I left the house alone after he was gone. It felt like stepping into a different world. I drove with the windows down, letting the cool air wash over me, trying to remember what it felt like to exist outside of him. For so long, my identity had been his wife. My life had been wrapped around him, my choices woven into our shared existence. Now, I was just me, and I didn't know who that was anymore. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to a coffee shop alone. I ordered a drink without thinking about what he would want. I sat by the window, watching people rush by, living their lives, completely unaware that mine had just fallen apart. For the first few minutes, I felt out of place, as if the world had moved on without me, and I was still frozen in the moment I had found those messages on his phone. But then, something strange happened. I took a sip of my coffee, and it tasted good. Something so small, so simple. Yet it felt like the first real thing I had experienced in weeks. A tiny spark of pleasure in a life that had been consumed by pain. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth spread through me. Maybe I wasn't completely broken after all. The ghost of him. But healing wasn't a straight path, because even on the days I felt strong, the memories still came. Some hit me like a sharp knife, painful, sudden, cutting deep. Like when I was folding laundry and found one of his shirts still buried at the bottom of the basket. I held it for too long, staring at the familiar fabric, my hands shaking as I realized I would never wash his clothes again. Other memories were softer, like when I was cooking dinner and, out of habit, almost set a plate aside for him. I had spent years loving him. I couldn't just turn it off. And maybe I didn't have to. Maybe it was okay to grieve the love I had lost. Maybe it was okay to miss him, even if he wasn't the man I thought he was. Letting go. One night, after my daughter had fallen asleep, I found myself standing in front of our closet. His side was still full. His jackets, his shirts, the shoes he had left behind when he walked out the door. It felt like he was still here, like he had just paused his life in our home, as if he could come back whenever he wanted and pick up where he left off. But he wasn't coming back. And even if he did, I wouldn't let him. So I grabbed the first shirt and pulled it off the hanger, then another and another. Piece by piece, I removed him from my home, from my space, from my life. I expected to cry. I expected the pain to hit me so hard that I'd collapse onto the floor. But instead, I felt lighter, like I was finally making room for something new. Something that wasn't built around him, something that was just mine, the beginning of me. I didn't heal overnight. There were still days where I woke up feeling the emptiness beside me, nights where I rolled over, expecting warmth, only to be met with cold sheets, But each day, the pain loosened its grip. Each day, I found a little more of myself. And one morning, as I stood in front of the mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in years, I didn't see a broken woman. I saw someone who had survived. I saw someone who was still standing, despite everything. I saw me, and for the first time since he left, that was enough. Time didn't heal me. I healed myself. Day by day, piece by piece, I built myself back up from the wreckage of the life I had lost. I learned how to breathe again, how to wake up without feeling like I was drowning, how to exist without needing someone else to define me. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for a man who didn't love me. I was living for me. The unexpected message. It had been months since he left. Months since I had last seen his face, last heard his voice, last felt the weight of his betrayal pressing against my chest like a stone. And then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. I glanced down, and my breath caught in my throat. His name. For a long moment, I just stared. I had imagined this moment so many times. The moment he would reach out, trying to weave his way back into my life. I had wondered how I would feel. Would I panic? Would my heart race? Would I crumble under the weight of old emotions? But as I held the phone in my hands, I felt nothing. Not love, not longing, not anger. Just nothing. For the first time, his name on my screen didn't have the power to break me. I opened the message. I miss you. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and then I deleted it. No reply, no hesitation, no second thoughts, because I didn't miss him. Not anymore. Falling in love with myself again. One evening, I took myself out to dinner. Alone. I sat by a window, sipping a glass of wine, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. And I felt happy, not because I had moved on to someone new, not because my life was perfect, but because I had learned how to love myself. For too long, I had given my love away freely, pouring every ounce of my heart into a man who never truly valued it. But now, I was keeping that love for me. And maybe one day, I'd meet someone new. Maybe I'd love again. Maybe I'd open my heart, take that risk, and trust someone with the fragile, beautiful thing I had rebuilt. But I wouldn't need it, because for the first time in my life, I was enough. The final goodbye. One weekend, I packed up the last of his things. The boxes had been sitting in the garage for months, untouched, as if a part of me had still been waiting. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I drove to his new place, parked outside, and left the boxes by the door. No note, no explanation, just an ending. As I walked back to my car, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Not just from the boxes, but from him. From everything he had taken from me. From everything I had allowed myself to lose. I wasn't the woman who had begged him for answers anymore. I wasn't the woman who had sobbed on the kitchen floor, holding his phone like it was a grenade about to explode. I wasn't his wife. I was me. And I was finally free. A new beginning. That night, I stood by my bedroom window, looking out at the world before me. A world that was mine to rebuild. A world where I wasn't defined by someone else's love, but by my own strength. A world where I was whole. Not because someone else had put me back together, but because I had done it myself. I closed my eyes, breathed in the cool night air, and smiled. Because this wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. The beginning of me. The beginning of love. On my own terms. At the beginning of a life where I would never settle for anything less than what I deserved. And that was a love story worth telling. The end